This is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness Podcast. I'm here with my co-host Walter Dial, who's tax partner at GRF CPAs and Advisors here in Bethesda, Maryland. Our mission here on the podcast is to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building sellable business value or transferable business value, and then helping you to plan your eventual and inevitable exit from the business. We want to help you build a business that's sellable and then exit successfully on your own terms and conditions. And in building a sellable business, you also need to protect the value of your business and continually manage areas of risk, like the one we're going to talk about today, cybersecurity. We've discussed this topic here before, and we plan to continue to do that because it's so important. And by the way, October happens to be Cyber Awareness Month, which is another good reason for us to talk about it today. Our goals in this episode are, again, to raise awareness of this risk and then to provide some action items you can take to mitigate the risk. Listen, check out some of these statistics that are a little bit scary. 43% of cyber attacks target small businesses, and then 60% of small businesses that are attacked go out of business within 6 months. 66% of business owners polled are concerned about a cyber attack, while 47% say they have no understanding of how to protect themselves against a cyber attack. So in the work that Walter and I do, in helping owners build a business that's sellable, clearly, if a small business owner experiences a cyber attack, the chances of that happening are greatly diminished. And so today's topic is protecting value through cyber risk management.
And Pat, our guest is one of my coworkers at GRF CPAs and Advisors, Melissa Musser. Melissa is a principal at the firm with over 15 years of professional experience in this area. And our listeners may recall, we spoke to Melissa, I don't know, it may have been a year ago. It's been a while, but it was a great episode, and I'm sure you can find it at NSLP or at grfcpa.com. Melissa's expertise includes establishing, maintaining, and optimizing internal controls, compliance, ERM, enterprise risk management, and cybersecurity programs. Melissa is the proud recipient of the 2018 AICPA, American Institute of CPAs, Information Management and Technology Assurance Standing Ovation Award. Wow, Melissa, that's pretty impressive. I was not aware of that. Welcome back to the podcast. Always great to have you. And as Pat mentioned, this is definitely a timely and important topic, and I think it's only going to get more important as time goes on, but it's super important right now. I mean, just look at us, we've all been doing Zoom calls and everything, and I know, that even raises a lot of security issues. I have a call scheduled with a client and their investment people, and their investment firm has not been allowing them to use Zoom because of security issues. I think they said they're just about to get cleared to begin using Zoom, but they haven't been able to in the past. So not knowing much about this, it sounds like even meetings online like this pose a risk. So let me just start with a really basic question. Can you just describe cybersecurity? What is it exactly?
Sure. And again, it's an honor and a privilege to be with you all today. This is my passion, to be of service. But one of the things I'm really most passionate about is breaking things down. Most risks are actually rather intuitive in the sense that it can be explained simply. And so that's really what my goal is today, is to really make sure everyone really understands the risk and some basic things they can do. I know this can be a very complicated topic, but there are some things that can be done, and it can be rather intuitive at the end of the day. So cybersecurity, what is it? So it's, think about your computers, your hardware, your network. It's the protection of all of that, as well as the information that's on them, or Zoom, for example, the verbal information that is transmitted and stored and pictures of us. So it's the protection of everything related to systems and any of the damage that can be caused from that.
Very interesting. So Pat cited, a lot of statistics. I mean, amongst our client base, are you seeing more and more cyber attacks, or what's going on in the real world out there?
Yeah. So cyber, I feel like it really exploded in, 2018. And, that's around the time that I really started ramping up my credentials and expertise. So we are seeing the world completely change, from COVID, also as it relates to moving to the cloud. So, even the term cybersecurity in my definition before, I guess I should have also included now, which is kind of new, is, third parties. How do third parties play a role in, cybersecurity? So like, for example, we're a CPA firm, we do a lot. We do advisory, cybersecurity, internal audit, but we also do financial statement audits as well. And so, and a lot of times I'll assist the teams with the evaluation of the risk of material misstatement to the financial statements as it relates to their IT information systems. And so, a lot of times it'll be like, I'll want to talk to someone in charge of IT, and they'll shoot me off to a third party provider. But at the end of the day, their accounting application was in the cloud and the third party provider had nothing to do with that. And they didn't connect those dots, so, those are kind of it's like the wild where, they think someone's maintaining something, but someone's not. And at the end of the day, we have less control and less oversight. But so what was happening a couple years back was a lot of ransomware attacks, really, really sad. A lot of organizations had their data on servers, like on site, not greatly protected, especially small organizations, small businesses. So there was a lot of movement to the cloud, to these third-party providers that I'm talking about. And so now, unfortunately, but likely to be expected, especially during COVID, we've seen some of the biggest cloud organizations get ransomware attacked, some of the biggest players. And so now it's like, okay, maybe the cloud wasn't as secure as we thought it was. But still, at the end of the day, the cloud is likely, more secure in a lot of ways because they have the technology to patch and provide the services. But what we're seeing is a transition to third-party risk management. How are you making sure your third parties have you transfer your data to an IT service provider? How do you know their servers are up to date and that they're patched? Are you just completely trusting them? What can you do? And I'm going to talk about some things that you can do to protect them. But to answer your question, yes, it's, we're seeing a lot of that, a lot of activity with ransomware, simple things you can do like backups to protect yourself. And I'll summarize that at the end. But we're also seeing, simple things like, people clicking links, right? That's kind of the big thing. We're seeing a lot of, fraudsters pretending to be people that they're not, getting into people's emails. So a lot of scary stuff happening there. One client example, a recent one, someone was able to get in through their system. The ransomware usually starts with someone clicking one of those links, right? And they get into the system, they freeze everything. And then to make matters worse, they were able to get through and start transferring money out. So, in that scenario, hopefully you've had a backup and you're able to restore, but hopefully you have multi-factor authentication at your banks. And so that's where you get into third-party risk management. What are the controls that would prevent someone to pretending to be me? So there's a lot of activity. I think some pretty basic controls can be implemented to mitigate some of these different scenarios. And we can talk about that in a little bit more detail.
Great. So from just a cybersecurity standpoint, as far as your records go, not counting on, people who click on things they shouldn't click on. I mean, could a small business owner say, well, look, I'm just going to go on the Amazon cloud, and then are their problems solved?
No. Well, I mean, obviously you have you have to do third-party risk management. You have to understand, I mean, there's configurations that you have to be concerned about, the way that it's configured on who's managing that. Are you managing that internally, the configuration? Are you having a third party manage it? And, do you have some sort of backup, for that kind of contract? So there's a variety of different types of setups in that type of scenario to think about. So usually what I would suggest do, because every organization has a different context. Every single one. So I could tell you all these different things to do, and you're like super confused. But when it comes down to it, every small business is likely set up completely different. You may have a server next to you. You may be on Amazon. You may have a third party. You may have multiple third parties. So the first thing you should do, you may have different email hosting, website, payment transfers, different banks. So the first thing you should do is just sit down and write it all out. Do a diagram. Used to be that people had a network diagram, but there isn't really networks in a small business, so to speak. You hear big businesses doing that, but you do in fact have a network, so to speak, a system diagram, or just a picture of where everything's going. What are all the different third parties? Is our accounting system in the cloud? I mean, even QuickBooks is in the cloud nowadays, even the most simple. ADP or your payroll, that's a third party provider. What are all that? Your bank is a third party. Your bank could get acquired by someone else, and all of a sudden your multi-factor might not be turned on, or something to think about. So let's map it out. Let's figure out, and then you do a risk assessment, and maybe you need to be compliant with GDPR or privacy. So let's incorporate that into our consideration and say, okay, here's my map of all of this different types of activities that we have within our organization. Here are some of the things that we want to be concerned about. We have some private data sitting here. Is it on Amazon, or where is it? Is it in our email? Is it on our laptops? How do we? It's like figuring out what are your crown jewels and how do we protect them? And that's like a risk assessment. How do we protect our crown jewels? There could be some small businesses that don't really have anything that needs to be protected, so to speak, and they can calculate their loss at, okay, my laptop goes down, I have it backed up on some pin drive, and, I feel secure. So you have to do that risk assessment. You have to figure out what your risks are in order to properly protect. But I think, and that's where it gets to be intuitive. If you really look at it and think, okay, what could go wrong and what can we do to prevent this? I think you can go a really long way with making some really easy, smart changes that don't have to cost a lot, to the way you're set up and what your structure is. And because the way the world is changing so rapidly, you may need to rethink your structure every year. Every year, just like you would, think about your long-term strategy and vision for your organization. You're thinking about your strategic plan, how you want to reach people. Well, your IT configuration, your digital transformation should be included in that, and you should just be constantly evolving in those regards.
Yeah, Melissa, you mentioned calculate your loss, and as you know, the businesses that Walter and I are working with are 35 million and under in revenue. Most of them are 10 million and under in revenue. Do you see, as you're doing the work that you do and the assessment work and the calculation of the potential loss, do you see a big difference between businesses that have like 10 million and less in revenue versus it seems like you would, because there's more people, there's more technology with greater companies. Is that kind of the rule of thumb? The more people, the more technology, the more.
Well, so I'm a big fan of looking at your context. It kind of depends on what you do. Do you work with children? Because I don't care how big you are, you better have that children's data protected, right? So it's like when it gets to what kind of data do you have, or do you run an online business where, if your systems go down, your business shuts down and you lose tons of money. Maybe if it's during a certain month of the year where you have your highest sales or something like that. If you're able to operate, and you could go down for a while and still run your business, then, you know what I mean? So that's where you start to get into risk appetite or to really define what is a critical event for us. That gets into enterprise risk management, which is my favorite topic, but it's really figuring out what are the top risks, because you hear so much about cyber and you're afraid of it. But at the end of the day, is it really your top risk? Could you take that money, invest it in talent? Is that where that's where you get into looking, what is our strategy? What are we working towards, and what are our top risks? And yes, cyber is a very big risk. It's something we should think about, but it's important to look at your own context. It could be very different, and you could be a very small organization and be very much so at risk that you will go out of business if you don't do certain things. And I use the, children's information as an example, but there could be some other examples out there as well. I urge people to look right now, if you have a privacy policy on your website, to take a look at it and make sure it's accurate, because a lot of times people forget that they have that out there and it's outdated and it's something everyone can see and look at. So like, and then you talk about HIPAA compliance or different things. And now that people are working from home, it may not even be correct anymore. The way that you say data is handled may not even be handled that way. So you could get into a lot of trouble. Let's say you have a cyber attack and they start to kind of do some kind of forensic, okay, how did this happen? What went on? And then looks like some private data was compromised. Let's look at the privacy policy. Well, you're not even doing what you said you did. Now you're negligent. Now you're in trouble. And a lot of times organizations forget to look there as well. So, and sometimes I'll see organizations put stuff on their privacy policy that they don't even need to, and now they're biting off more than they can chew. So I think, taking a good look at that every year in conjunction with your risk assessment is a smart thing to do.
Yeah, and so, at the outset, Walter mentioned COVID, and the last time you were with us was in the spring when COVID was just getting started. And so I'm curious now that we've been into it for a while, and then looking forward, what have you experienced in regard to, have attacks increased during COVID because of all the remote stuff that's going on? Have you seen things during this period that you weren't seeing before? And any kind of advice you can give about going forward, because it seems like it's going to be with us for a little bit longer.
I have seen organizations thrive during this, surprisingly, and maybe for their long-term benefit, making more of a digital transformation. So that's been one of the really big positives. Yes, we have seen attacks. I have seen attacks on large third-party cloud organizations that really wasn't something that we would have expected maybe a year ago, and organizations not really being prepared or having a plan for that. Hey, I just put everything into this third-party cloud and I didn't have a backup plan for when that went down, because then that gets into third-party risk management. Like, what are you doing to identify what third party you're going to engage with? How are you holding them accountable? And what is your plan for when something goes wrong? And so COVID's really exposed third-party risk, because a lot of third parties have been impacted, and then that kind of cascades down through, whether they're out of business completely or they've been a cyber attack or whatnot. So from that regard, that's kind of where we're seeing a lot of activity and a lot of changes since COVID.
Can you, you may have done this at the outset, but can you do it again? Can you define what you mean by third party? Because you continue to bring that up. I just
to me, it's risk management now, because small businesses likely don't have in-house IT anymore. They've outsourced it. That's been one of the kind of the bigger changes. So you're outsourcing your IT. So I'll go and, like I said before, I go to do the information security, part of an IT assessment for a financial statement. And I'll say, okay, well, provide me with your information security policies. Oh, we don't. Our third party provider has that. I'm like, well, I'll ask the third party, and the third party provider will give me their IT policy. So some of these small businesses don't even have their own IT policies. But that it still doesn't get to third parties. But my point is that third party is so big as it relates to cybersecurity. So what it is really trying to identify who are all your third parties. And you may even need to go through who all you paid within the last year to even figure that out sometimes, if you're big enough, and your procurement isn't so centralized. And then kind of figuring out, okay, what of those third parties, which ones pose a cyber risk to us? So there's two things you need to do. One, educate your employees not to click links, right? Obviously, and have, some kind of, antivirus. Another thing you need to do and focus on, which you may not have been doing because it's relatively new, is third-party risk management. So what are all the third parties that can pose a risk to us, whether we host our data with them, we exchange data with them, they're tapping into our system somehow, or we're sending them over private information. And that now, if somehow they got compromised, we're the ones who are going to have to be notifying everyone that there was an incident, and so, what are all those ones that could cause us some kind of risk? We all know the Target breach was an HVAC vendor that was coming in through the system, or there's this famous one with a Vegas hotel was hacked through like their fish tank because of the monitoring. So, so what are all these vendors, and this is part of your risk. This is part of that kind of diagram I was talking about, like who all, and then for those ones that could come in, and this third-party risk management known as TPRM. So for those significant vendors, let's say the top 10%. So I'm not telling you to go do something crazy or, something super exhaustive. Like, so maybe it's 5 or 3 vendors, like the top vendors that pose the most risk. Do certain procedures on them. Ask them for a SOC audit. Do they have a cybersecurity audit? Do they need to be PCI compliant? Are they collecting credit card data on behalf of your organization? Because guess what? If something happens to them, someone entrusted you with their credit card information. You trusted somebody else, but you didn't tell the user that. So now there was an attack on their end, but guess who's in the paper? Guess who loses their business? It's you, even though you didn't technically, lose it. So people think, oh, third party is not. So now even insurance providers I've seen now make this transition within this year. It used to be if you're going to get cyber insurance, they used to ask you for your most recent cybersecurity audit or some kind of cybersecurity. Now they're asking you for your third-party risk management policies and procedures because they know now that you don't really have anything. It's all outsourced. And so now they're asking for that. So it's basically, what are you doing on your top risk vendors? Doesn't have to be all of them. And it kind of depends on what they do, but are you requesting an audit from them annually? You can go to ADP and just download their SOC report. Some of the most reputable ones already have it under their thing. You download it, they're reputable, they're doing things. You're looking at your service level agreement. If you're working with kind of a ma and pa shop, they're kind of someone or someone was referred to you that manages your IT or your help desk. What are you doing to make sure that they're even solvent through COVID? How are they doing? Are they going to go out of business and all your eggs are going to be left? And, what are you going to do? Do you have some kind of backup plan? You could ask them for their financial statements. That could be part of what you do to make sure that they're, financially viable. You can also run cybersecurity scans on them, relatively affordable. I know our firm can run scans like that on third parties for as cheap as like $2,000. It could be, if it's somebody that you're completely trusting and they're not getting an information security audit done, you should be doing scans on them. Your data could be sitting on old, outdated systems, for example. So there's, making sure that they themselves have cyber insurance. So there's a list of things. And actually, we have on our GRF websites a checklist, third-party risk management checklist. I wrote some blogs on this topic. I'd be happy to help anyone. But again, the design of your third-party risk management would depend on what your third parties do for you. It would depend on their context. But I would also add, and what we've seen a lot of activity in is business continuity. The activity, we've done a ton of business continuity plans, but it's in a sense, it's, okay, our third party just had a ransomware attack. What's our plan? We've seen a lot of organizations develop emergency response teams in order to say, okay, this scenario happened. Would we be prepared? Let's come up with a plan. That would be kind of part of your business continuity. It would be part of your third-party risk management is for those key vendors having a plan for when that failure may or may not happen.
Yeah, so as Walter and I are working with the clients that we work with, the small business owners, and this is, I'm sure this is true for you too. We're always aware of the long and always growing list of things they need to be concerned about in building the business, growing the business, but also protecting risk. And that they're constantly being asked to invest time and money in. And it's a constant battle, isn't it, to prioritize, if you're a business owner, what is going to serve the business short term, of course, but then also long term strategically, and then devote the time and the resources, financial resources to it. And of course, now for a number of years, cyber has been on that list of all the things, and it's going to continue to. It's probably going to just keep moving up the list, I would imagine. So two questions. What would you say are the risks of not prioritizing management of cyber attacks? And then also, well, answer that, and then I got a follow-up question.
Your clients likely have policies and procedures around bank reconciliations and, having 2 check signers. Sounds basic, right? Well, to me, cybersecurity is pretty basic, right? I mean, it's just as basic. So can we now think about, like we do accounting controls, can we think about that the same way we think about making sure passwords are updated every 60 days? You have antivirus. Before you engage a significant third-party vendor, vet them. Again, very intuitive stuff, but do you have a policy, denoting what you do? We usually have accounting policies. I mean, maybe you do, maybe you don't. I hope you do. But so think of it like that. Why would you have one thing and not the other? To me, they're both relatively, common sense kinds of things. So to me, that I think thinking of information security as some kind of far out thing, it's not. It's just like your account. It's something that you do. These are some basic controls that you have in place. So I would suggest thinking of it like that. But then I would also suggest doing a risk assessment, because I do think you can overspend in cyber. I do think you can invest in this technology and not use it correctly and actually have essentially wasted money on, these assessments that aren't adding value. So there is the other side of that. You could spend too much in cyber. You could not spend enough. So you really have to take the time to identify your own risks, and the context, and also look at your strategy. Where do you want to be? Where do you want to go? And what would cause reputation damage? What would be significant? Do you have private data? Do you maybe not want to store that private data? Do you not even need it? Why are you even holding on to it? Get rid of it. It's a liability. So maybe there's some things you could do differently. Maybe you don't even want to have those credit cards on, stored. Maybe you want to have a third party handle it completely. They need to maintain PCI compliance, and you know what I mean? So there's some things you could do in the front end. It's always better to work smarter, not harder. So that's what I would urge you to do. Everybody needs an information security policy. I prefer to see 2 sets: an end user set, a set that your employees use and they actually sign off. We know not to save sensitive data on our laptops. We know we need to have complex passwords. We know we can't go into Wi-Fi, or we'll have a firewall on our home network, or some mobile. We'll have a lock on our mobile if we have sensitive. So have them sign off on that. We know not to click links, and that there's these recent scams going on. Maybe you do that every so often, but you have an end user set, and then you have your own management level set that talks about how you're going to configure, what are we going to do to evaluate third parties before we let them into our network. And then here is our business continuity plan and our emergency response team. Here's our insurance company that we're going to call. Here's the attorney we're going to call, or we need to call media relations. Have that written down, because you have about 48 hours to respond. So if you have it written, it could be as simple as, we just call this person. Because with COVID, or a disaster could strike, you want to make sure someone could pick it up on your behalf, and execute some things, just in case you weren't available. So it's always good to write this stuff down, and doesn't need to be, like I said, just like you probably have accounting policies and procedures. This doesn't have to be overwhelming. Just get it down, write it, start somewhere, and every year grow on it, right? Don't try to make it perfect. Just get something written down and some basic high level stuff, and then just grow it from there.
Okay, yeah, so we're coming to the end, and Walter's going to close us out in a minute. But here's another, and I think he's got at least one more question for you. But I want to squeeze this one in, because owners are always thinking about, how much is this going to cost me? I mean, financial, and it all makes sense. I'm concerned. I don't want my business to go out of business in 6 months if I get attacked. I don't want to be part of the 43% that's getting attacked. Or if I am, I'm going to assume that I'm going to be. I don't want to go out of business in 6 months. So for the smaller business owner, again, let's focus on the 10 million and under in regard to size. Are services like what you're providing, are they priced in a way? Is the pricing as such that they can get this done? Are we talking about thousands of dollars to get an assessment, or $10,000s to get an assessment? Can you give any kind of feel for?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. So we do cyber scans. You'll actually get a score. We can run a scan. We have this technology is amazing, but we can run a scan on you for $2,000. That would be like our floor price. And then we could also, between that and up to, let's say 10 grand, but even in the middle of 5, from that assessment, work with you on, what should your policies and procedures look like, help kind of guide you through the third-party risk management process. So anywhere between that range, we try to price things very affordably because we care and we think this can be done. And the technology out there is becoming more affordable. And so we're able to give our clients that good price there. And I think it's very helpful because the scan can be run on your third party. So you kind of get an idea. So just kind of depending on how you're set up, you'll get a lot of valuable information. It goes anywhere from, we would be able to tell immediately, if things didn't look like they were patched, your information's being hosted on outdated servers. So sometimes the scan is run, if your servers are in-house, then they're run on your in-house servers. If they're hosted by someone else, it would be run on someone else. And some have been very surprised to find out that they haven't been, the third party that they were trusting wasn't as up to date as they thought it was, but also scanning the dark web, looking to see about certain types of compliance against PCI and different levels of compliance. So lots of really good information. And actually there's like a short 2-minute demo on our website as well, if anybody wants to take a look at what the scorecard's like.
Fantastic. That's great.
So Melissa, this has been great information. Thank you very much. I'm sure our listeners have really enjoyed it. If you had the opportunity to sit in front of one of the millions of business owners worldwide who listen to this podcast, and they said to you, this has been great information, but I just have no idea how to get started, what would you say to them?
So, I'd look at your strategy, right? And if you haven't updated your strategy, I would update your strategy. Try to figure out, where do you want to be? Where do you want to go? And what are the risks to you achieving those objectives of yours? What a ransomware attack, cybersecurity, privacy, reputation, those are all very important things to consider. Business continuity, and I think, there's also an upside. So, and I think business owners really like to hear about that. It's not just a risk, but there's an upside to consider. So if you invest in this technology or you invest in this, you'll be able to grow or expand. You'll be able to be, more efficient. So I always like to look at what are the positives of investing in this. So I would also urge you to think of it as bread and butter as accounting. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I don't like it and I don't, but, we do it. And, how could you not, And so that's what I want you to think about information technology as well. I want you to think, basic password stuff and, basic training of your employees, how could you not have this designed or how could you not vet a third party, like I said before? So kind of a couple things, looking at your strategy, looking at the upside and how it's going to help you. And then also thinking of some things as kind of, this is what it is. This is what we have to have.
Hey, Melissa, if you owned a small business, how often would you do the scan?
Well, at least annually. You should do your risk assessment at least annually, unless there's been some kind of significant change, a change in, vendor or change in your system. Or, COVID happening, you may, do a complete, some significant event, but at least annually you would want to do a risk assessment, do a scan on yourself and, any significant third party as well.
Terrific. Great content, great advice. Everybody should at least get a scan.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then every year from that, you do your risk assessment, you update your policies and procedures so that they match, right? Because the whole point of doing a risk assessment is to implement controls, and those controls live in your policies and procedures. Just like having 2 bank signers is a control, your policies and procedures are controls to mitigate risk. So you do a risk assessment, you may have new risks, you implement new controls.
Well, fantastic. As we close up here today, is there anything that you'd like to promote? You got anything going on that you want to try to sell here?
Well, our cybersecurity scorecard, we also do risk assessments. We do anonymous surveys of organizations. We help with enterprise risk management, strategic planning, internal audit. We really try to run the gamut, focusing on small to mid-sized organizations, just adding incredible value. But, the solutions are right-sized and they're, like I said, intuitive. We don't like to offer things up that just don't make sense. So, in a nutshell, if you have any kind of risk concerns, feel free to reach out. We love to be of service.
Fantastic. And how can they reach out? How can they reach you if they want to?
So it's Melissa Musser. So mmusser@grfcpas.com. And you can also find us on our website at grfcpas.com.
Wonderful. Thanks again, Melissa. You're becoming a regular, and it's clear why you are. You're a great guest.
Oh, thank you guys.
Yeah, you're welcome. So if you want help, listeners, in maximizing the value of your business or planning for that eventual and inevitable exit, we know this, 100% of business owners are at some point not going to be business owners. And so you don't want to wait until there's pressure to begin planning for that event, or you won't be ready. So if you want or need help with either one of those things, you can contact Walter at 301-951-9090. And you can contact me at 301-859-0860. You can also access resources at exitreadiness.com, grfcpa.com, and nslp.com. Thank you for listening, for tuning in. And until next time on the Exit Readiness Podcast, this is Pat Ennis and Walter Dial signing off.